Welcome back to a new post today. And a very big development coming up just before the general elections of 2024, and this this case goes back to the pleas filed by two NGOs, that is Association for Democratic Reforms, which the UPSC students usually follow the reports regarding the government and also the parliament, etc. And another very common NGO that we usually hear of in the political field and with regard to questioning of governance, plays a very active role with regard to questioning the government and also the policies, is Common Cause. Now these two NGOs submitted a plea regarding the electoral bond scheme, and this morning itself a very big announcement by the Supreme Court calling the electoral bond scheme as unconstitutional, and on the basis of Article 19 of the Constitution. So we know that right to information is not an explicitly defined right to fundamental right in the Constitution of India, but it is implicit in the Article 19, which speaks of freedom of speech. So two NGOs way back in 2017, when after the scheme was launched in 2017 and later in 2018, filed petitions in the Supreme Court urging the court to put an end to the electoral bond scheme. So what is the basis for their arguments that they are calling for an end to the electoral bond scheme? Let's analyze. Now 6 years later, the court has finally pronounced its ruling in this case, and in November 2023, the court had also announced that it had concluded the hearings in the petitions challenging the bond scheme as well. It said that at a time when the electoral bond scheme had serious deficiencies, so this is what the Supreme Court had said, had created an information black hole, so withholding information, I would say, or secrecy of information, where the government actually pronounced that the electoral bond scheme is for transparency and had to be removed since it puts a premium on opacity or unclearly scheme, what would say, or lack of transparency, I would call it. Yes, so the Supreme Court now ordered this SBI, which is the only designated bank to receive the electoral bonds or to issue the electoral bonds, to disclose the details of the electoral bonds encashed by the political parties, now including the date and also the denomination of money as well. The Supreme Court said that the SBI would be submitting the details of the political parties that received the contributions through the electoral bonds since April 2019 to the date of the Election Commission. Further, the Supreme Court directed the Election Commission to publish all the details on its website before March 31st, 2024, very much before the general elections itself. Now, this is one of the very big verdicts coming up in our judicial system. The Supreme Court has struck down the validity of the controversial political funding just a few months back before the elections, now delivering a major blow to the central government, especially who has a major hand, especially an advantage over the electoral bond scheme compared to the opposition parties. And let's look how. Now, pronouncing the verdict, the CJI said that it is a violative of freedom of speech and expression under Article 19A of the Constitution. The Supreme Court scrapped the electoral bond scheme in a unanimous decision. So it's not a majority or a divided vote, but it is a unanimous decision, and directed the State Bank of India to stop issuing the electoral bonds. Now, the scheme, which was notified by the government in January 2nd, 2018, was pitched by the government, that is the BJP government, as an alternative to cash donations that are made to the political parties who get their funding through cash donations, and also in an effort to bring in transparency in the political funding as well. Now, according to the provisions of the scheme, electoral bonds may be purchased by any citizen of India or entity incorporated or established in the country. An individual can buy electoral bonds either singly or jointly with other individuals without disclosing their identity. So the identity of the donor is secret. Critics have said that this eliminates transparency, which the government actually touted that the scheme brings about in the electoral funding, doing away with the previous form of electoral funding, and gives an edge to the ruling party who forms the government at the center. So what exactly did the Supreme Court say? These points are important. So Justice D.Y. Chandrachud said that the financial support via the electoral bonds to the political parties can lead to a quid pro quo arrangement whereby only the ruling party is at a benefit. The electoral bond scheme is not the only scheme to curb black money. This is one of the grounds apart from transparency, that the government had justified its actions, that it is going to curb black money. But let me tell you that the RBI and the Election Commission of India said that it is an avenue for more generation of corruption and hidden money or black money. There are other alternatives to this. This is what the Supreme Court said. Infringement to the right of information is not justified on the purpose of curbing black money, and this is what the Supreme Court said, that just because you are justifying it as a right to as curbing black money, you cannot violate the right to information. Not all the political parties, not all the political contributions, said the Supreme Court, are made with the intent to alter the public policy. Students, daily wage earners, etc. also contribute to their favorite political party, and to not grant an umbrella of privacy to political contributions only because some contributions are made for other purposes is not permissible. This is what the Supreme Court said. Now, this court recognized the right to information about social, cultural, political, economic issues, and that it is just not limited to state affairs but also to the principle of participatory democratic principle, whereby the donors come and contribute to the political parties. Supreme Court therefore struck down the electoral bond scheme and all the provisions that were made to bring it into effect, including the Income Tax Act, the Companies Act, etc. Everything has been struck down from today. So what are the criticisms to the electoral bond scheme exactly? And first, let's see how does this give an edge or the benefit to the ruling party. So some of the major criticisms about the electoral bond scheme is that under the electoral bond scheme introduced by the Modi government in 2018, these bonds must be brought from the SBI only and can be donated to the political parties anonymously, covering the identity of the donor. While the donors use the electoral bond scheme as technically anonymous, however, the SBI is publicly owned, meaning the government in power can have access to the donors, whoever donate to whichever political party, and also the companies that donate to political party, thus giving the ruling party an upper hand to access the data, because SBI is not a private bank and it is a public bank. This is likely to dissuade large donors from using electoral bonds to donate to the opposition parties for the fear of criticism and also backlash from the ruling parties. This also gives a chance of harassment of the companies or the individuals by the ruling party in power, because they use the bonds to fund the political parties. Further, in 2017, the Indian Central Bank, that is the RBI, our very own central bank, cautioned that the government that the bonds could be misused by shell companies to facilitate money laundering. In 2019, the Election Commission of India, the constitutional body, described the system as a retrograde step as far as transparency in the donations are considered. And since 2018, secret donors have given nearly 16,000 crore Indian rupees to the political parties through the electoral bonds. From 2018 to 2022, the period analyzed by our very own NGO, Association for Democratic Reforms, a non-governmental organization, said that 57% of these donations via the electoral bonds went to the ruling party, and that is the BJP government. And now, as India prepares for more than 900 million voters to go to polls in 2024, these funds have been allowed by the BJP to transform it into a dominant political party using the electoral bond scheme. From financing tens of thousands to WhatsApp groups, promoting its agenda on other social media sites, paying for the block booking of private jets, electoral bonds are provided the ruling party a massive injection of resources, giving it a very, very clear edge over all its rivals. Since their introduction, electoral bond scheme have become a primary method of political funding. 56% of all the funding into the political parties comes from EVs, says Association of Democratic Reforms. The ability to donate money anonymously has made them extremely popular, but it is also shrouded in secrecy, which we may argue that it is undemocratic and non-transparent and could provide a very, very safe cover for corruption as well, and also money laundering as well. Now, when it was brought into a new law allowing this type of funding, the Modi government, or the present ruling political party, which has had the government at the center, did away with a number of requirements, further reducing the transparency in the political funding. A previous law capping corporate donations now was abolished and corporate donations could be given to the political parties. Companies were no longer required to disclose their donations, shrouding it in secrecy in their statements, and foreign companies which were not allowed to fund Indian parties could now do so through their Indian subsidiaries. The electoral bond scheme therefore legalizes backroom lobbying. This is what the Election Commission of India says, and also the Association of Democratic Reforms, and unlimited anonymous donations, scrapping out the total basis of argument that is bringing transparency in electoral funding. Now, it is a way to legalize corruption, and this is what it says: the secrecy of the donor's identity, whether it is corporate companies, whether it is companies, whether it is individuals, was bigger problematic. It could be a big time corporation, or it could be players funneling illicit money through the shell companies. We really do not know who's donating, and this has become what many called as legalized and institutionalized corruption through the electoral bond scheme. So how does the scheme actually benefit the ruling government at the center? Now, the BJP is the single largest beneficiary of the electoral bond scheme, and this data is given from the Election Commission, which shows 57% of the total donations between 2018 and 2022 through the electoral bond scheme went to the BJP, amounting to almost 5,207 crore rupees, almost $635 million. By comparison, the next largest Indian party, that is the Indian National Congress, received only 952 crore, which is just $115 million. Now, the electoral bond scheme specifies that only publicly owned SBI can sell these bonds. This may argue ultimately that the government of the day has an unchecked power over the national bank, that is the SBI. Now, since the bond is issued by a public sector bank, an unprincipled government may get to know the list of the donors and also the recipients, so it is anonymous for us, but then this is open to be misused by the ruling party or the government at the center and against the political opponents mainly. The former Reserve Bank of India and economist Raghuram Rajan wrote this to the government, said that the mismatch between the funds received by the BJP and its nearest rival Congress serves to illustrate very well how the unequal playing field is being brought by the electoral bond scheme, which have been created only to serve its own ends of the ruling party. This is what the critics and also the economics says. For example, for instance, in May 2023, the Congress and the BJP sparred off against each other in the assembly polls in the southern state of Karnataka. Affidavits filed by both the political parties with the Election Commission that the BJP was able to spend much more money than the Congress in the Karnataka political polls. And this is how the schemes or the policies are actually used beneath the paper, showing transparency and legibility for funding of the political parties, but it can be used for other means as well and other aims as well, especially to rival your political parties and also to have a biased attitude. This definitely does not bring in transparency as touted by the government according to its policy of electoral bonds funding of the political parties, and instead has shown how it is skewed towards the favoring of the political party at the center, that is the BJP government. So there's much more of the discussion that is going to be around the electoral bond scheme, because now this has been, but what is the next alternative for the funding of the political parties? Will they revert back to the previous funding, or will the government or the Supreme Court or other committees come up with such other solutions? Let's wait and watch. This is definitely important from you, from your governance point of view, for all the for all the competitive examinations, UPSC and the state service examinations as well, and also very important from your personality round as well, because this is a debate. And I hope this information was really helpful to you all. If you did, please do like, share, subscribe, and don't forget to comment, and I shall see you in my next post. Until then, happy learning.